of 10 years. I just found out the other day, this is the 11th year of these seminars. I found the original one, that talked about running with, the running shoes had just been invented. We had a discussion of it. It's been a long time. So I appreciate you helping to keep the tradition alive. I hope that you got one of these flyers. I hope that you see one of these flyers in the newsletter so that you'll be able to email me like you all did. It was wonderful to let me know that you were coming, and that made it so much easier for me to reserve a place for you, because we can't have any more than just three more people in the room tonight. Appreciate that. When I try to pick the people and have the people and invite the people to come and speak to you, I try to get a cross-section of good people, smart people, talented people, people from various angles so that you get a good look at stuff. Mr. Wolff is down the street on the other side of the river from St. Charles MEDFITNESS. He's spoken here before. He's very sharp, and when I was having trouble with my half marathon and my worry about my knee problems, and knowing that in the back of my mind I wanted to be faster and I wanted to be stronger, he's the guy I called, because he was he's so well known in the community, been here for many, 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 many years. And if I was needing those two things, and being as slow and weak as I am, I needed both drastically. Tough crowd tonight. That Mr. Wolff is the person I called on for his expertise. He said, "Don't call me 3 days before the race," is what he said. He said, "Have me at a lecture in the middle of winter where we can make a plan and take that plan all the way to the Naperville half next year, and I can help you get there. Just don't call me on such short notice." So without further ado, you've got some sharp people in front of you, Mr. Wolff. It's Mr. Wolff from MEDFITNESS, St. Charles, Illinois. Thank you for coming.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Glenn. This is a great opportunity for me to not only help you folks, but just to get better known in the community. And again, thanks, Glenn, for giving me the opportunity to be here. We're going to drill down on some basic information that has been around for a long time, but as humans often are, we like to make mistakes and make more mistakes and rack up a ton of mistakes before we sort of adjust our routine and our habits. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is how strength training makes you faster, and what are some basic principles you can apply to your own training. You just said, "Okay, Richard, I get it. If I strength train, I'll be a better runner." How do I make that come alive in my own life, and what can I do in very realistic ways to add that to my already busy life of training and everything else I have going on? So we're going to jump in with what I like to refer to are some speed facts, and so everyone should have this handout in front of them. Let's walk through these one at a time so we can at least embrace the truth behind how is it that strength training makes me a better runner, and a faster runner, actually. So number one is what we call injury resistant. The first thing that we all recognize that if you're here at Dick Pond and you're getting coaching from professionals and these guys are helping you with footwear, you're getting a ton of professional advice. And so the worst thing that can happen is that you injure yourself and you can't then put that good professional advice to use. So you can't practice, you can't train, you can't do anything because you've got a knee injury or a back injury or hip injury. And so what we want to do, the best athlete is an athlete that doesn't get hurt. And so professionals call this carpet time. If you look at the value of a professional athlete who gets paid, what he's most interested in is getting paid. And so I know you guys aren't getting paid to run, but the benefit to you, the upshot is what? That you actually get to run. You get to do these fun races. You get to get together with the team here, and you get to have all of these great things in your life happening. So we want to make sure that that happens. And so the first thing we want to say is that how do I prevent injuries when I'm running on a consistent basis? And the first thing you do is you build your muscular system. So when I think about running, and right now I'm just walking back and forth. And so the weight that my body is supporting is my body weight, right? If I weigh 190 pounds, the force through my heels into my knees, my hips and my spine is 190 pounds. But if I suddenly start to jog and I start to run faster and my body weight is lifted off the ground, when the heel strikes the ground, that's called the ground reaction force. You've probably heard this term before. And so that ground reaction force for running is about 3 to 4 times your body weight. So for me, that's up to 800 pounds of force on the weight-bearing surface of the knee, on the hip, and the whole spinal column. So if I do that day after day, week after week, months after month, particularly if I'm 57, which I am, and I'm not 21 years old anymore, the soft tissues, the cartilage, the other things that protect those joints, eventually is wearing out like a tire. And so I exponentially increase the risk of weight-bearing joint injuries by running and not strength training at the same time. And the reason is your muscles are the shock absorbers. When I build up the quadriceps and the hamstrings, what those guys basically do is they offload the force to the hip and the spine. And so by having stronger muscles, I'm basically getting a fresh set of shock absorbers at any age, whatever age I am when I'm strength training. So the worst thing you can do from an injury prevention standpoint is to go run and to not be strength trained at the same time, whether it's off season or in season, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. Which you want to be fast, but first and foremost, you have to practice the running, right? You can't get fast by thinking about it. You have to go out and train. And so when an injury shows up, it completely wipes off the training schedule. And so this is true for professionals, it's true for everyday folks with normal genetics like you and I. We have to make sure we're training. And so the best way to ensure musculoskeletal health and weight-bearing joint injury stress reduction is to have fresh shock absorbers. The only way we do that is by increasing the strength of our muscles, all right? So that's number one. People who strength train are faster because they train more consistently. They have less downtime, or as professionals call it, less carpet time, all right? So that's fact number one. Number two is if I go out for a walk, and instead of saying I'm 57, I go out for a walk and I take a nice brisk walk and I walk 3 miles. Let's say I walk 3 miles in 45 minutes, a 15-minute pace, and I say, boy, that was refreshing, that felt good. It wasn't very difficult to walk 3 miles in 15 minutes. It actually felt fairly effortless to me. But if you take a man or woman the same age who has never strength trained in their life and has lost 30 pounds of muscle and frequently replaced it with fat, and have them walk the 3 miles. The 3 miles is difficult, actually. It's fatiguing. It's hard for them to perform that activity for no other reason other than they are weaker than I am. Now, I'm not some special guy, but I've been strength training since I was probably 10 years old. So the activity is harder because they're weaker, and it imposes more stress on the cardiovascular system. So the one way to not stress your heart and your vascular system and to not feel overwhelmed is to have each muscle group capable of generating more force. And so, for example, if I start doing just a static wall squat like this, and I start timing myself, I say, boy, at 1 minute it's hard, at 2 minutes it's harder, at 3 minutes it's harder. Let's see how long I can go. Obviously, the average human is not going to be able to sit like this very long before their heart rate goes up, they start breathing heavily, and they're so fatigued that they just have to plop down and stop. Why can I do that longer? Not because my cardiovascular efficiency is better, because I am stronger. So my point here is that when the muscles are capable of generating more force, that means I'm putting less demand on the cardiovascular system. So think about it. That walk that I took that was so easy, 45 minutes, how many of you know people who, if they took a 45-minute walk, they might tell you, that was a little bit demanding. You guys might be anomalies here because you're running, but they might say, oh, that was a tough walk. I was a little bit winded at the end of that walk. I was fatigued. Nothing to do with cardiovascular efficiency, everything to do with force production and muscular strength. And so what you want to see is that when you're running, your heart rate is completely linked to the strength of the muscular system. If my quadriceps, let's say when they contract, I'm going to speak in real simple terms, when they contract, they can generate 200 pounds of force. Versus the guy running next to me, his quadriceps contract and they can generate 100 pounds of force. His quadriceps are going to work a lot harder than mine because mine are stronger. I don't have to use as much muscle. So I can use less muscle mass and therefore I don't need as much oxygen to generate that force production, and therefore the intensity is actually lower for me because I'm stronger. So I'm circling back to this issue of strength. And so when we think about running, we think about the cardiovascular system, we think about our lungs, we think about our heart, which are critical parts of the system here. But in the end, we only move because of our muscles. I'm not moving because of my heart. I'm not moving because of my lungs. I'm walking, standing, and running because of my muscular system. So when the muscular system gets weak, it imposes greater demand on the pulmonary system, greater demand on the cardiovascular system as a whole, and therefore I fatigue sooner, and exertion is higher, and so I'm more likely to slow down. So my point here today is that you finish faster. When you're stronger, you finish faster. So you have some strength reserve and some gas in the tank where over the last, whether it's a mile, half mile, 2 miles, let me ask you guys, since you know more than I do about this, when you're running a race, the goal generally is to finish faster than you start, right? You don't say, Glenn doesn't say, now for every mile, go slow. Now get even slower. They don't say that, right? You want to speed up to some degree and finish strong over the final miles of the race. And so to do that, I have to have some gas left in the tank. I have to have, we call it some strength reserve. And so this is where strong muscles come into play. So the take-home message is this: yes, your heart is important, your blood vessels are important, your lungs are important, but the only reason you are capable of running and running fast is because of your muscular system. Let's not confuse things here. And being stronger puts less stress on your cardiovascular system because you can move your body with less effort. Does that make sense? I don't need to use as much muscle tissue to go running because I'm so strong versus someone who's weak is using all of their available muscle because their muscles are so weak that they're overwhelmed with this activity of running. So it makes you faster by reducing the demand on the cardiovascular system, and then you're able to finish faster because you have some reserve because of this. The last way it makes us faster is by keeping us lean and small. And so, remember years ago the argument was that, well, you know, I'm a runner. I want to run this race. I've got a goal. I want to do it under certain minutes. And I don't need to weight train because that's going to add bulk and mass to my body. And that's going to make it harder. I'm going to have to carry around an extra 10 pounds of muscle, which is going to slow me down. So there seems, common sense seems like this would be correct. But what we learned about strength is that most of it is not related to cross-sectional size. For years, if you talk to a fitness professional 10 years ago, they would say, yes, a bigger muscle is stronger. And there's some truth to that, but not all of the increase in size corresponds to increases in strength. Powerlifters are a good example, and Olympic weightlifters are good examples. They're incredibly strong, but they're not massive the way bodybuilders are. They're almost somewhat normal people to some degree. And so my point here is that most of the strength gain that you and I get when we strength train is neuromuscular. It's not related to cross-sectional muscle size, and so you can get 50% stronger without ever getting bigger at all. And so you can add literally no mass to your body, or I shouldn't say none, but very little. We call this motor recruitment deficiency. It means that your neuromuscular system is more efficient at recruiting muscle fibers, contracting them, using them, and so I don't have to have these honking big shoulders to go do something. I don't have to have big muscular legs to go run 20 miles. Yes?
Well, like if you start strength training, will you see like a gain in the scale that maybe like, let's say you're, because I'm 20 pounds shy of my goal weight. So
Sure.
but if I start strength training this winter, will I see a gain at the scale and won't be able to get down to my goal weight?
Well, you could, and so here's an important issue. That's a great question. So what you want to bear in mind also is not just the scale weight, but the body composition, right? I just had a client ask me this the other day. He said, my pants have gotten loose, but the scale has gone up. So his waist size had shrunk, he'd lost body fat, but he weighed more on the scale by a couple pounds. Well, why? Because he has added lean mass to his body. That's correct. So that can happen, but that's not a bad thing. So you want to look at your goal weight in the context of the big picture. If you are strength trained productively and you know that your body is getting smaller, then that's good. Don't worry too much about scale. It's a good tool. I don't want to say don't use
I
a
know.
scale at all, but
Yeah.
you got to bear, are you strength training? And we'll consistently see that in our clients. They're gaining weight, but their clothes are looser and their waist is smaller, and so on and so on. So yeah, and remember, why does that happen? Because muscle is more dense than fat, right? It has a higher water content, so a square inch of muscle is heavier than a square inch of fat. So I can literally gain weight and shrink my body. It seems like those two can't happen side by side, but they do actually. So that could happen. Yeah, don't let that
That's what's
worry
been
you.
stopping me, honestly, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, you will be healthier, you'll be a faster runner, you have like 7,000 benefits by adding that strength training. Don't let that stop you. That'll help you with reducing body fat. It'll actually help you.
Because it
So-
speeds up your metabolism, correct?
Well, it does, that's one of those myths. It
Oh,
does do
okay.
it, but it's really small.
Oh, it's very small,
That's
okay.
actually one of the worst reasons why you should strength train, is it increases metabolic rate. But isn't that what we all hear? Oh, I'll become a fat burner if I strength train, yeah. I'll have this big fat burning in front of, it's one of the worst reasons because it
Yeah.
ends up being about 6 calories a day if you gain a
Oh.
pound of muscle. So it's tiny,
Very
right?
good, yeah.
But there are other good benefits to strength training, why it will help you long-term running, health, and so on and so on. So I don't want to say don't do it. That's my business, of course, but yeah. But it's overstated in our culture. It's overstated.
Okay.
So we've said fewer injuries so I can train and get more skilled. That's important. We've said that strong muscles reduce the demand on the cardiovascular system. More force production is good. And we said that most of the strength gain, a high percent, is neuromuscular. It requires no increase in muscle size at all. Doesn't mean you won't build some muscle. Doesn't mean you can't get a little bigger and stronger, but the majority of it is neuromuscular, so it happens without being big and muscular. So, right, so you can be a pretty fast, efficient runner without having to have a huge, massive body and bog you down. So, all right, now having said that, if we agree that this is probably a good idea for me, how do I make it come to life in my own routine of work, life, and everything else that I got going on? And so there are some common mistakes that many runners make that I would like to talk about tonight and try to give you a sense of what can you apply to your own strength training routine. And even if you've not strength trained, how would I begin? What I would suggest to get the ball rolling with this overall. So the first one is related to what Glenn had mentioned early on, which is that in running circles, we have the notion that I should only strength train in the off season, and then when the season rolls around, I should go run my races, do my runs, do all that stuff. And so it seems to make some sense, but here's the problem with that. Your muscles are a use it or lose it tissue. If I'm training them in a strength workout and I'm gaining strength and it's going up incrementally over time, and then I take 4 to 6 months off to run through the warm weather, I guarantee you're getting weaker every month that you're not strength training. So you're basically losing what you just took 6 months to build up, and you're no better off at the end of that time. And so what we have to figure out is how to train in season and off season. So we would like to describe this as a forever behavior. Strength training is something you can do today, and you should continue it forever. We're not even talking about the health benefits of strength training. We'd be here for 700 hours if we just started looking at all the health benefits strength training has to offer. But we're talking about running here, so when I get weaker, I lose those benefits I just talked about, and I basically slow down. We walk slower, we run slower, everything slows down the weaker you are. What's the most vivid example of this? Someone in their 80s, right? Who's walking like this. Why are they walking like this? 99% of the time, where are they walking like this? Any idea? They're shuffling?
Something with their ligaments or shrinking or
This is called
tight?
this is called sarcopenia. Anyone know that term? This is called sarcopenia. So it's the age-related loss of muscle. And so they're so weak that they can't even lift their foot up and walk with a normal gait. This is the number 2 reason why adults are institutionalized in America. They are forced into assisted living because they're too weak to live safely on their own. And so that's an extreme example. But that's the end stage effect, right? It's just this shuffling, I can't even pick my feet up, and if I fall down, I'm going to crack my head because I can't even rack fast enough. That's all muscular fitness. 100% preventable, 100% reversible. So the same thing is true for running. You just don't see it on that severe magnitude. But over time, if you spend 6 months not running as a trainer, you're effectively, as long as you're like all humans and getting older every day, You are effectively losing strength every day of your life. Now, you don't notice it because it's not super dramatic, but over 5 years, 10 years, you notice it, and the older you get, the faster it happens. So if I'm 57, if I look at my strength change in the next 5 years, I'll lose muscle faster in the next 5 years than I would have in my 40s, 30s, 20s. We call this muscle protein breakdown. So muscle protein breakdown accelerates as we age. And so we want to prevent that 110% of the time. And of course, strength training is the only way to do it. So I'm saying that we want to find a way to strength train in season. Here's the best thing I can tell you guys. If you're training in season, just train once a week and make it a full body workout. That will allow you to protect the gains you've achieved throughout the rest of the year when you're not in season. And then you have time to run, recover, and do all the fun things that you want to do. But one full body workout per week, challenging, is sufficient to maintain the strength that you have built over the following months and years. Now, what about number 2 here, muscle failure? This whole issue of should I lift light weights or heavy weights has been popular in recent years in the United States. And so many people will say, well, you know, I'm a runner, so I want to be fast. So I'm not a competitive weightlifter, I'm not a bodybuilder, so I shouldn't lift heavy weights. So really, what is the bottom line here? Good news is you can go light or heavy. What we now know about muscle adaptation is that if the end of the exercise is the same, it doesn't matter how you got there. So what am I saying here? If I was on a machine and I was bench pressing 100 pounds up and down, and maybe I did 20 repetitions before I felt I couldn't do it anymore, and then I lowered the weight by half and I did 50 pounds, but I did 40 repetitions until I couldn't do it anymore. As long as I go to that point that we call it muscle failure, the point where you can't do another repetition, if you hit that threshold, it doesn't matter if it's light, heavy, or in between, you'll get the same benefits. And so you don't have to have light weights or heavy weights to get stronger. The only downside to the light weights is it's more painful. So has anyone here done weight training on their own before, or just period? No. So one thing that you'll notice if you start strength training is if you're doing any exercise, let's say you're doing that chest press again, as the reps go up, what's also increasing is muscle discomfort. You know, we loosely call that the muscle burn, right? The muscle burn is greater on rep 10 than it is in rep 1. It's even higher on rep 20. It's much higher on 30. So it's significantly more painful the more reps you go. And so this has also been studied as well. To get someone to do 30 to 40 reps is like equivalent to just torturing the death out of them. It's just so incredibly painful. So what we want to be is practical, right? You know it takes effort, right? But you don't want to just have this unbelievable suffering every time you work out. So we want to weight heavy enough that you reach that muscle failure at a rep range that is tolerable for you. And so in my case, I'll give you just a quick, simple example. We train slow at MEDFITNESS, so that means that we lift the weights up in 10 seconds and down in 10, really slow. And so my weights are pretty heavy. But we usually recommend between 4 to 6 repetitions. In conventional terms, that would be, if you're just kind of going faster, that would usually be 8 to 12 repetitions roughly to muscle failure. We're doing fewer because each rep is longer. But so I would do 4 repetitions, and my clients would ask me, well, why are you only doing 4? Because I'm over here doing 6. I said, look, I just want the suffering to be over sooner. I just would rather get it done with instead of suffer through a painful 5th repetition and a painful 6th repetition. Why not get it done sooner? So we've created what we call a 4-rep workout where we have a heavier weight, people get to muscle failure sooner, and it's still just as hard, but less muscle burn, so to speak. So we have less of these metabolic byproducts building up in the muscle. So what I'm saying is that choose the rep range that works for you. We want you to fail. We want you to get to the point where you can't do the next one. That's the stimulus that gets the change going, to make you stronger, healthier, etc. But you can do it with, you know, whatever number of reps that accommodates you. But in general, I'd say lean towards a weight that feels heavier because you'll just get there sooner. You don't want this to take 5 minutes to get there. My one exercise for me takes a minute to a minute 20 seconds, and then I'm done. That's it. I'm not doing 3, 4, 5 minutes of bench presses here. 1 minute to a minute 20 seconds. That's it. So, so it doesn't matter, light or heavy, go to muscle failure, but I would vote for heavier so that you get it done sooner and endure less suffering in the process, so, all right. I've never met anyone who says, my goal is to endure as much discomfort as possible in my strength workout. Well, that's not an average human being, if that's what we're telling you, so. All right, so, light or heavy, choose the load that you want, but I would vote towards a little bit heavier versus lighter to train at a level that is doable for you. Now, what about sport-specific training, guys? If we're runners, shouldn't we be adding running and strength training together to get the best bang for our buck? Shouldn't I have ankle weights on or a weighted chest vest or do these things as I'm running to sort of stress my running muscles and see if I can't become better that way? This is equivalent to the worst way of practicing running. What is, I won't ask our team here, but what is the worst thing you can do? If you said, hey, I want to be a fast runner, what's the one thing that if you did it, I guarantee you won't be a fast runner? Don't ever run, right? If you keep saying, I want to be a fast runner, but I'm going to go over here and study engineering for 6 to 10 hours a day. And you tell me again, I want to be a fast runner, I got to go study engineering. Nothing wrong with engineering, but if you want to be a fast runner, what do you have to do? You have to practice running in the conditions that you're going to run in, right? Which would, what would be the normal attire? Right? T-shirt maybe, shorts, some Dick Pond running shoes, right? You would need to go run like that, correct? You can't get fast without not doing it. So why would you put a weighted vest on? Why would you put weights around your wrists? Why would you put weights around your ankles unless that's how you're going to compete? As far as I know, there are no races where people have weights on their shoulders, ankles, and wrists, right? We don't see this. I mean, look at the professionals, even the collegiate and high school. They don't run like that. How do they run? They train the way they're going to compete. And so we call this negative transfer. This is a neurological issue. If you start running with weights on your body, you're basically training your neuromuscular system to move slower. Who's going to be faster? Someone with 5-pound ankle weights or someone without 5-pound ankle weights? Who will run faster? My money is on the person without 5-pound ankle weights every single time. Same thing. Who's going to run faster? Someone with a weighted vest? I mean, it feels cool to have that heavy weighted vest on. I feel like I'm working hard, but I'm training my muscles to track more slowly because my speed is less. And this has been studied over and over again. So negative transfer is the term here. You're basically confusing the neuromuscular system. A good everyday example of this would be golf. You know, if you swing a weighted golf club, you know what happens to your driving distance? It decreases because you're learning how to move the club slowly. I mean, who swings a club faster? The regular club or one that weighs 2 pounds heavier? The one that brings it heavier, the heavier club moves slower, right? So slower speed, force or power is speed times force, so right? So my point being that if you want to be a good runner, run. Don't mix strength training and running. Don't put weights onto your body. Run the way you should run and run the way you compete. That will make you a faster runner. Anything else confuses the neuromuscular system and actually increases your risk of injuries. And so keep it simple. They should be completely dissimilar. What's your name, miss?
I'm Gail.
So Gail, you should go do your strength workout wherever you're going to go do it. Let's say you're at the fitness center somewhere. Go do your strength workout. Lift machines, weights, whatever tools you like to use, it doesn't matter. Go do it, and then go run wherever you're going to run somewhere else without ever thinking about weights, right? But when you start mixing those two is where your performance is compromised and your risk of injury goes up. Right? Now I know that this is a popular activity for professional athletes and even Olympians. They'll do things like this, but these guys, you have to remember, when you look at pros, Olympians, and even collegiate athletes, they succeed in spite of what they're doing because they are genetic anomalies. They're completely different than you and I. They're in the 1% club. You and I have average genetics. We're normal human beings. We represent 90 to 95% of the planet. And so we can't do something that's going to hurt us and still succeed. But they'll do things that are bad for them and still succeed because they are such genetically gifted human beings. And so don't compare yourself to collegiate, Olympians, professionals. They're two different playing fields. They live on a different planet than we do. So, okay, so don't worry about sport-specific training. These should be dissimilar. Go train at the gym than go run somewhere else. And keep those two activities separate. Now, what about protein? I just want to touch on protein for a moment here. We know that when you're strength training, you're stimulating your muscles, right? It's a form of stress to the muscular system. And so there is cellular breakdown within the skeletal muscle. Now, this is good because our body responds to this cellular breakdown. It sees the breakdown and says, oh, wait a second, this is a form of stress. I need to heal and adapt and get healthier and prepare for this stressor next time. And so your body does that, but it can only do it with the necessary building blocks to adapt and recover. So that's protein. With skeletal muscle, protein is the most prevalent compound. I mean, our muscles are mainly water. They're about 70% water by weight, but after that, it's all protein. And so I want enough protein in my diet to get this healing process going and to make sure I can get stronger and recover and so on. So I'm going to talk just briefly about that for a second. But the other thing that you want is you want enough protein so that the fat-burning proteins within the skeletal muscle works better. Anyone here familiar with the term with mitochondrial proteins? Does that ring a bell for anyone? And not that you have to know that. So there's different kinds of proteins in your skeletal muscle. There's the structural ones that make up the muscle itself. Those are called myofibrillar proteins. Those are the ones that get damaged when you strength train. So we want those to heal and recover. We need protein to have those heal and recover. But when you're running, even if you're not strength training, guys, if you're running, the proteins in the skeletal muscle called mitochondrial proteins that are responsible for burning fat and burning carbohydrate and getting cellular energy to the muscular system, those guys get stressed and they get damaged also when you run. And so I want them to recover as well. So even if you're not strength training, you need more protein to have those guys recover and to become more efficient at doing their job of providing glucose and fatty acids for oxidation. And so either way, strength training or not, you need more protein if you're going to be a runner, whether you're strength training or not. And so the number that I'm recommending is in front of you there, 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. This number, just to give you context, is basically double the RDA. And so if you just look at what the average adult is doing, the average adult is getting more than the recommended dietary allowance for protein. So we're already getting more protein than the government says we need. When we look at the sports science literature, it tells us that we need even more than that to optimize building muscle and to optimize adaptation of mitochondrial proteins. So this is a very sort of sports-centered recommendation. I wouldn't recommend that threshold for someone who's real sedentary and just doing nothing, but if you're active, if you're running, and particularly if you're strength training, this is the number I'd recommend, 1.6 grams per kilogram. So everyone know the pound to kilogram equation. 1 pound is 2.2 kilos. So just take your weight divided by 2.2 to find out how many kilos you weigh. I think I am at 187 pounds. What would that be? You guys are, you get that calculator out. There we go, 187 divided by 2.2. 85, so I should consume 85, or I'm 85 kilos is what I am. So take 85, your weight in kilos times 1.6. So mine is about 130 grams a day, roughly. So when you start breaking that down, you think, oh, for heaven's sakes, 130, that seems like a lot. How do I get that in? Two things that
Excuse me, can you do that again, the math?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
so a kg of body weight,
Yeah,
so to convert that to pounds, it's 2.2
Yeah.
times your body weight.
correct.
Divided
Well,
by.
divided by, yeah, divided by.
Okay, so it's your pounds divided by 2.2.
Here's a better number for you. Take your weight times 0.18. It'll give you the same number.
Weight times,
I should have just started there,
0.8?
yeah, right, sorry, guys.
okay.
Take your weight times
Point-
0.18, you'll get the same number,
1.8?
yeah.
Is it point
Yeah,
one
times
eight?
0.18, yeah, that'll give you the 1.6 conversion. I like that. I don't know why I even went down the kilogram path, so, okay.
And
So
how does that then convert to how much protein you should have?
that's the total grams of protein per day.
Okay,
Yes.
whatever your weight times 0.18
yeah,
is how much
right,
protein.
yeah.
Okay, that's
so-
easier.
And so for me, again, that's about 135 grams a day. So then what I want to do is we know that protein timing makes a difference. So I don't want to clump 120 grams at dinner and say, oh, I met my protein. I had 10 at breakfast, I had 120 at 9 p.m. You don't want to do that. Our body responds and grows more effectively when we give our body protein throughout the day. So what we're trying to do is upregulate a process called muscle protein synthesis. It's sort of the protein, the muscle building switch. We turn that on when we take this number and we divide it into 3 to 4 doses throughout the day. So again, for me, what does that end up being? It's about 35 grams per meal. So if I did 3 meals and maybe a snack in the evening, I can get that protein threshold. So you know what the number is, split it out between 3 to 4 meals. And the other thing I want to just mention about this is that when you start breaking that number down, it can feel like a lot of eating. As we age, we do what scientists refer to as skewed eating patterns. And so it means that we have meals that are high in protein, then meals that are really low, and then high. We don't eat the same protein across all meals. We tend to have this sort of up and down pattern with protein intake. So again, to optimize things, you want to try to get that threshold at each meal. It's okay to go above it, but you want to be there. That's the sort of muscle building switch we want to turn on. Now, having said that, this is where we look at the science on this. This answers the whole question of should I take a supplement or not. That question has been around forever. And if you go outside of the supplement industry and just look at the science on this, what we know about using dietary supplements like a powder that I mix into a fruit smoothie or something, if I do that, it typically makes it more doable for people to get to these thresholds versus having to eat again and again. Oh, geez, 3.5 hours has passed. I got to eat protein. That can get a little overbearing for some people. So I use a protein supplement in the morning just because it's simple, not because I'm not willing to eat those foods, but in the nature of my schedule and the hours I work, it just is easier in my routine, that's all. It's not a right or wrong. Yes?
Do you have a favorite protein powder that you like?
Well, there are, nowadays, I'll say 2 things. One, nowadays there are decent protein powders available in stores like Jewel, so you can find decent products over the counter. One that is decent is called, the brand is Orgain. Sort of like organic, but Orgain. They make protein powders. They make animal-based ones. They make plant-based ones if you're vegan or vegetarian. I use the one called Sun Warrior, and you can find their products at sunwarrior.com. I don't think they're in any stores there. You have to order it online. But that's just the one that I like. I use a plant-based one. I put cherries and bananas and ice and water. I have a very filling, satisfying smoothie in the morning. It keeps me full for a long time. I get my protein checked out. I don't have to worry about it. I go into my 65,000 hour workday. But so you just want to think in practical terms. If you're willing to eat those foods, then do it. That's a great thing to do. But if it's simpler to occasionally use a supplement here or there just to bridge that gap and to make it more doable, then you want to do that because we want consistency with this habit.
How much do you cut, like when you're in off season, how much do you cut back then during, is there a percentage, a good idea?
Well, what I'd say, if you're off season, so that means you're not running at all?
Well, no, running, but not training for a marathon or a half marathon or something like that.
Yeah, you could cut it back. You could go from, 0.16 on the kilograms. I would go down to about 0.14. Am I saying that right? 1.4, I'm sorry, 1.4. Yeah, instead of 1.6, I would go, if your activity dropped, 1.4 would be sufficient.
Times your body weight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or actually, that's the kilogram one. I'd have to do the equation for body weight.
That got really confusing.
That's okay. So here's the conversion, and you guys, I'm gonna ask you if you want me to send you our runner's guide, and it has this in it actually, so I'll probably get that to you. But if you take that 1.6 grams per kilogram, the number to get body weight on that, just take your weight times 0.18. So start there, weight times 0.18.
0.18, right?
Yeah, so it's gonna be less than that. It might be, just off the top of my head, it might be 0.14. I'd have to do the exact math.
For which one?
For just being less running in
Yeah,
off-season, not doing as much, you're less active.
So
Yep.
0.14.
Point, not, yeah, 0.14, yes, 0.14. We'll get there. Where's my calculator?
Is it 1.4 or 0.14?
0.14
Oh, okay.
per pounds, 0.14. That's just a ballpark guesstimate
Okay.
coming down on that. But you can certainly email me and I'll send you
Oh, thank
the
you.
exact number for you, so. You guys with me on this? So this is about building muscle running better, recovering, having more oxidative potential because those mitochondrial proteins are recovered. So again, I wouldn't recommend this number to your neighbor who is the same age, but is completely sedentary. That number would be lower for them. So this is for active people trying to maintain better health and lean body mass, so, okay? Okay, so,
He's still working on
It's
this.
0.18.
yeah, so for
during
body
the
weight, your weight times 0.18 gives you the total for the day. And then split that across 3 to 4 meals or snacks, yeah.
And then you said 0.14 for off-season.
Yeah, if you're
Okay,
not
point
doing
one
much
eight.
and you're not
Okay.
training heavily, yes, I would decrease it some. I would decrease it,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Thank
No,
you.
That's a real good question though, yeah. What do you do if you're not doing as much, right, right. The last thing I'll say with regards to protein is that if you consume some before you go to bed, we call this pre-sleep feeding. If you look at the science on this, what is the longest period that you go, usually without eating if you're not on a fasting program? If you're just a normal person eating, it's when you're sleeping, right? If you sleep 8 hours, you're not eating for sleep hours. So what happens when we don't eat? What happens to muscle protein balance in the body when we don't eat? It starts to, muscle protein breakdown takes over. And so at the end of a night of sleep, you have an effective loss of muscle mass. This is tiny in terms of total body mass, but that's what's happening. Two things happen. We either build muscle when we eat protein, or muscle protein breakdown takes over when we don't eat. So you want those two balanced out. So when I'm sleeping, muscle protein breakdown is occurring unabated because I'm not eating anything. So it just keeps going and going and going. So I'm losing muscle mass when I sleep. Now that's not a health issue, but what we know, if I'm trying to optimize more muscle mass and more strength gains, it's likely that if I give myself a little bit of dose of protein before I go to bed, it could be 2 hours before, it doesn't have to be right before you go to sleep, that will help mitigate some of that muscle protein breakdown through the evening. So I let people sort of self-select on this. You don't have to split hairs, guys. If you have a good, healthy dose of protein based on our recommendations at dinner, and that works for you and you're comfortable, then fine, you're gonna benefit from that. But if you're willing to take that next step and have a little dose of protein of 1 hour, 2 hour, half an hour before you go to bed, that may help mitigate increases in lean body mass. So, okay, if we look at the latest science on that whole issue of timing. Now, should you have protein right after your workout? That's been a popular recommendation, or right after a training run. I mean, the science has been a little bit mixed on this, but we know for the most part that after intense exercise, whether it's a hard run or a strength workout, protein sensitivity is elevated. So that just means your body is better able to absorb and use protein and put it to use immediately following an intense, vigorous exercise session. And so that window is open for quite a few hours, so you don't have to eat right after you train necessarily. Some people like to do that, then that's fine, that's okay, that's good, you're still benefiting. If you wait 2 hours, that's fine, you're still benefiting. What we do is we take that total pile, we just say one of your meals or snacks should be within several hours after your training, whether it's a run or a strength workout, whatever it might be. That's a good time to get some high quality protein into the blood to help start building things up. Because remember, running is catabolic, right? It's stressful to the body. You're breaking down tissues when you run. Same thing happens when you strength train. So it makes sense to get some high quality protein right after if it works for you, or within a couple hours, so you don't have to split hairs on this. But one of those meals or snacks distributed throughout the day. So this is important because if you're investing time in your running and your strength workouts, you just want to be eating in a way that supports that process and not sort of undercutting your efforts to get stronger and faster. So, all right. So that's everything tonight, guys. I'm going to wrap up by just letting you know that we are offering during the month of January half off our personal training. And so if someone's interested, you can train with us for however many weeks during the month of January for half off our normal price. That's really our specialty, is small group personal training. So we call small group 2 clients to 1 trainer. And so if I'm training you 2 ladies, that's a group, not 10, not 15, not 20. It's very much like one-on-one training, but that's our process and that's sort of our niche when it comes to strength training. So we're offering half off during the month of January, and that's available to anyone here or anyone that you know. The other thing I'm going to do, let me give you our free trial workout card. This is, if you ever said, hey, I just want to try what you guys
Thank you.
do. You're welcome. This is a way of just sort of kicking the tires at MedFitness without any obligation. You get a free workout with us, and it's a way to kind of see what we're all about, so you're very welcome. So that's always a way to learn more about MedFitness. You can also, if you'd like to get our runner's guide, which is, did I skip you guys? Sorry. You guys sitting over there, I tell you, man, this guy.
You didn't get it at
Here
the
we
end
go.
anyway, thank you.
Here we go, all right, sorry about that. If you'd like a compilation of all of the running articles that I've written for Dick Pond over the last year, just give me your email and I'll send those directly to you. It talks about some of the things we talked about tonight. It talks about some of the other things that we haven't talked about. We talk about protein. There's a link to our protein guide in there. So if you want that, just give me your email. I'll be happy to shoot that out to you so you have that resource as well. But we're in town, as Glenn said, we're just down the street on the east side of town on the corner of Dunham and Main Street in the Foxborough Plaza Strip Mall is where our studio's been. We've been there for about 20 years now here in St. Charles, and we started back in 1988. Our goal is to get to where Dick Pond is. Is it 51 years, Glenn? For Dick Pond? 52, okay. So these guys are just crushing it when it comes to creating a legacy in the community, but they're a great company. So if that's, if there's anything more I can do for tonight, I'm happy to answer questions. I'm here. I'm not in a rush to leave. I'm happy to talk to people and help you, but I appreciate you being here tonight. Glenn, thank you again for the opportunity to speak to your clients. I appreciate that as well. And good luck in your next race, right?
Thank you.
All right. Oh, I'm sorry. I have T-shirts. I'm sorry. I have T-shirts. All right.
While he's getting those, just so you're connecting the dots here, every newsletter you've received in the last 4 months, 5 months, maybe 6, has had an article by Mr. Wolff in that
Thank you.
newsletter.
Start with
So now
these
you can
guys.
put a
Thank
face
you.
to this with a name, with an article.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for coming in.
He, writes
Appreciate
very
it.
well, and it's
Thanks
every
for
week
being here.
you
You're
get one.
welcome.
Thank
You know,
you.
I do have, these are all larges. They're not really big, but I do have a couple smalls, ladies, if you want a small, so that might be a better fit. So Glenn gave me the scoop before I came in. He said, here's who's coming, and here's how I'd rank them for speed. I've got all the data, so, right. Oh, boy.
Slow with the turtle.
Thank you all for coming.
Oh, yeah,
Question.
What kind of strength training do you recommend?
Yeah.
If we're doing it on our own, or?
You're doing that on your own. Here's the good news. You can use whatever tools you want. You know, there's a lot of debate between free weights, machines, body weight, bands, kettlebells, dumbbells. What should I be using? There's so many different options nowadays. What's really clear is that it doesn't matter what tool you use. You can get just as great a results using body weight as you can using expensive machines. It's really what you have access to and being able to use those tools appropriately. So it's more about knowledge of use. And so I'd say use something that you're comfortable using, that you're familiar with, that you know how to use. Beyond that, it's really what fits for you. Now, of course, we use expensive machines at MedFitness because that's our business, and you don't have to have expensive machines to strength training. But we like machines just because the safety and efficiency profile is better. Nothing wrong with barbells and dumbbells, but if you take the average person who hasn't spent their whole life lifting weights, it's easier to how to teach them how to use a machine effectively than how to perform it with a dumbbell or a barbell. Those are more skill-related activities, but you can use them very successfully if you have the knowledge and skills to do that. So yeah, so really whatever is okay and whatever you feel comfortable, you're not losing out because you're not, using the latest technology. That's hogwash. That's hogwash. So yeah, it's really about making it simple. And so by the way, the one thing I'd say, if there's one thing that matters more when it comes to strength training, no matter what tool you use, no matter where you do it, whether it's on your own with a trainer, it doesn't matter. The one thing absolutely that matters most is effort. And so that's been clear for about 40 years now. We didn't know that back in the 80s, research scientist at Tufts University, Dr. William Evans, discovered that if you're 87 years old and you train at a high level of effort, you can get the same increases in strength that the 27-year-old gets. We didn't know that back then. This is where people lifting soup cans came out. Remember when lifting soup cans was supposed to be good? I'm not against soup, but soup is not heavy enough to generate an overload to the muscle. So you can do 700 reps with soup cans, you're still not gonna build stronger shoulders. So what we have to do is work hard enough to stimulate the muscle to adapt and respond. And so that we learned in the early 80s, and there's been a mountain of research since then. And so, in fact, I just wrote an article today addressing this issue called Live Stronger. And so the other thing you can do is, on our website, we have what we call a learning center. And we have dozens of articles and videos and lectures I've given. In fact, last year's lecture is there about strength training. And so if you just want to learn about strength training, just click on our website link and go down to the learning center. There's a ton of resources down there to help you learn more about it. But I'd say work hard no matter what you do, whether it's in the basement, work hard, go to a high level of fatigue. Otherwise, you're pretty much wasting your time by not fatiguing the muscles and overloading. Again, that's the opposite of what we would have said one generation ago. That's the opposite of what we said. So this is science from the last 25 years that has really become crystal clear. We have people, our oldest client is 87 or 88. And by the way, I do train my parents. They're both in their mid-80s, and they work out with me twice a week. They both work very hard. And so this is now something you should do forever. Again, I ran marathons for years, and I love running. I just happen to have 2 hips replaced, so I can't run anymore. So I love to run, but now I can't run. And so think about strength training. Can I strength train? Of course I can strength train, and I do that every week. I should do that until the day I die. That's the thing about strength training. It's a good for you habit. It also makes you a better runner. It makes you better at all activities, but it is a functional activity that really improves the quality of life more than we ever realized. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, we thought lifting weights was cool because we just like to be big and strong. Little did we know, 30 years later, every health agency on the planet says adults need to strength train. In fact, the World Health Organization, the largest health agency in the world, just updated their guidelines. You know what the theme of their guidelines was? Strength training should be carried into old age. Think about that for a second. The largest health agency on the planet saying strength training should be carried into old age. They give no cut point for when you should stop. Keep doing it. I know that jokingly when I tell people on the day of your funeral, first get a strength workout in, then go to your
Then go
funeral.
You'll be happier for it.
That's right. Yeah. You'll look great. Everyone will appreciate it. Look at the shoulders on that guy. Right? But it is a forever behavior, so you want to try to weave it in whatever simple way it works in your life overall. So, all right. Okay. Thanks again for your time, guys. Yes,
Thank
sure.
you. Thank
First
you.
one is, when Tristy was asking about proteins, what makes a good protein? Like if we go to the store,
Yeah.
there's gonna be this, that, and the other.
Sure.
Which one, why should we choose this one instead of that one?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, historically, proteins have been put into 2 buckets, what we call high quality, low quality. So the big bucket of high quality would typically be animal proteins, so meat, fish, poultry, eggs, cheese, dairy. But what if you're a vegan or a vegetarian and you're not consuming some of those foods? Can you get protein from plants? The answer is absolutely you can get protein from plants. You typically need to eat just a little more of it to offset the fact that it's not quite as high quality. So plant protein is usually called low quality, but it is still useful. You can still build muscle with it. It's still good for you, so I don't want to portray that as an unuseful food option. And nowadays, with the way things are in our world, more and more people are becoming vegetarians, more and more people are becoming vegans for a variety of reasons, whatever the reason might be. So if you're in that boat, just know that you can get plant sources. And so I'd say if you want our protein guide, and again, you can get it just about anywhere, but on our protein guide, we just list about 30 different foods and how much protein you get per serving, both plant and animal, just as kind of a quick, easy reference. So if you want to give me your email, I can send that to you. I just put down protein guide as a quick, easy reference, but there's no right or wrong, you know.
But I specifically was wondering what makes one protein powder better
Oh,
than
powder,
another
so I thought you meant food.
My
I meant
fault,
food.
I don't
Oh,
think I
okay.
used the word powder.
Protein powder, yeah. So the protein powder, well, for the most part, if you look at the animal-based protein powders that would have either milk solids or egg or things of that nature, they're all pretty equivalent. And so you're just looking for how many grams of protein per ounce. And I'd say 25 to 30 grams of protein per ounce, which is usually a scoop.
Okay.
That would be a good dose of protein for you. So, yeah, but there's, same thing for the plant. The plant should be very similar to that, and you can find that. You can find it easily on the label. It'll say serving size, 1 scoop is usually 30 ounces from a weight standpoint, and that should be between 25 to 30 grams of protein for that 1 scoop. Yes.
So would a pea protein be lesser of a protein compared to like whey protein or something?
Yeah, yes, it is. That's correct.
Okay.
If we look at the sort of the digestibility and the amino acid profile, the building blocks of protein and whey compared to pea protein, whey protein is superior. Again, doesn't mean you can't use pea protein. There's pea protein in the plant supplement that I take, and so that's a reasonable plant option. You just, again, would need to, if you had 10 grams of whey and 10 grams of pea, they're not, your body isn't gonna use them equally effective. The whey is gonna be preferentially effective at building muscle. It just means you gotta consume a little more of the pea, that's all, yeah. So I usually say 10 to 15% more on a gram level to even it out, yeah. So,
Okay.
yep. No, those are good questions, because those are popular issues
I
these
have
days, so.
one more question.
Yep.
There's I don't know exactly to call it, say a form of exercise, for lack of better terminology.
Yeah.
That you're just using your own body weight.
Oh, for strength training, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
plyometrics or something like that?
Plyometrics?
What is it called?
Oh, plyometrics? Yeah.
I just didn't remember what that word was.
Yeah, plyometrics isn't, well, plyometrics is just a high velocity activity. And so it's where you're jumping
Okay.
fast from one level to another, up on boxes, down from boxes. So that's usually, of course, it's body weight because it's you moving your body, right? But that in and of itself, I would say that's a pretty inefficient way to strength train. I wouldn't recommend plyometrics myself. I mean, think about it for a second. I'm pretty healthy, right? I've been working out my whole life. I have a fitness business. I'm also a dietitian, so I've been eating well for decades. And so, of all people, if I went and did plyometrics, within about 2 seconds, I'd have 2 dislocated hips. I'd have to have surgery again. That would be just ridiculous. And so, not saying plyometrics can't be used strategically, but there is a ton of adults in the United States who should avoid it like the plague because they have a ton of musculoskeletal issues. I mean, how many people have knee arthritis? Millions, tens of millions of adults. Get them to do plyometrics and see what happens to their knees. So you gotta be really careful. We want low velocity activities.
Okay.
And so when you're strength trained, there's no reason to jump, guys. That's not provide any mechanical advantage versus not moving slowly in a controlled fashion. So move in a slow, controlled fashion. And by the way, speed, people talk about having to lift weights fast to get fast. That's a complete myth. Speed of movement is 110% unrelated to the motor fiber recruitment process. And so you don't have to worry about fast twitch muscle fibers and lifting weights quickly to get faster. Those two are completely unconnected. So work hard, move slowly. That's why we go at the 10-10 speed, guys, because it is so flippin' safe. I mean, it was developed about 35 years ago at the University of Florida School of Medicine on a study on osteoporotic women. They said, how do we train these women without breaking their bones in the process? Can you imagine that? You're strength trained, all of a sudden you fracture your femur because you're strength training because you're moving so fast. That's a train wreck. So they came up with the slow protocol, and that's became known as super slow. So we use a variation of super slow. You move in a slow, controlled fashion. So if you're going to do something, if you're doing squats at home with your body weight, I would move at a speed like this. I would come down. I mean, there's a lot of details for me to explain, but I would move like this. This is the speed I would go at if I was going to be lifting weights at home. Same thing, if I was doing a push-up, I would move at that same speed. Slow, controlled. What happens when you slow down? We increase the tension on the muscle, and we make it harder without having to impose a ton of stress on the joints. And so, for us in this room, I wouldn't recommend plyometrics for anyone. Now, if I've got an 18-year-old athlete, sure, he can do plyometrics all he wants. But his body is physiologically different than ours. So, right.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
didn't understand what I was talking about.
No, that's okay. Yeah, great question. It is simpler than it seems to be, but yes. So thank you for being here tonight. Good luck with everything, and I'll have Glenn email me the updated times of everyone throughout the year so I have all the data to make sure that we post that on our website. So yeah, right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, sure. I'll send that to you. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just go ahead. I'll tell you what. Here,
Yeah,
let's
thank you
just.
for speaking tonight, but really,
Well,
it's very
you wanna
informative.
just my pleasure being here. Let me get a pen for you. Yeah, we'll send that guide as well as the protein guide too. Yeah, certainly.
Can I get a protein guide?
Yes, absolutely.
Beautiful.
Okay,
I've
thank
had to
you.
turn my daughter's a vegan, so we don't get enough protein.
Yes, exactly, yes. You gotta be careful, right, right.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank
good.
you.
Thanks for being here. All right. I'll read it back to make sure I have it right, so yeah. Bye, Gail. Runner. Oh, R, just an R, 247 A. Okay, perfect. All right, good. You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Okay, good. This is to get the articles and the protein or whatever you want. Would you like one of those both or?
Sure, I'll take both.
Okay, yeah, just go ahead and put your email.
I was trying with a sheet of half,
Send
4 by
those
8,
to you.
I used to go 5/8, 4 by 12. Cole,
Yeah.
just because you're over 18, doesn't mean there's a chance for you.
Okay. I'll send it to you. Good. Thanks for being here tonight, okay?
Thank you so much.
This is to get to send the, all the articles that I wrote for Glenn. That's right, that's right, that's right. Yeah, so our training is 25 a session. If you were training
like,
once a
sure.
week.
So she just brought
you
me
send it to 120 a
a
month.
huge, like,
Workout a week. If you did 2 a week, it's 25 a
freezer
session, so
full of
200 a month.
meat
for
stuff
training.
that
If
they've been
You compare that
hunting.
to any of the local
And
personal
one of
trainers,
them
that's
was like
incredibly affordable for personal training. Usually you're paying about $50.
Ladders were, thank you.
Thank you.
So
Good to
we're
see you again.
25 to
Good to
30.
see you as well.
Yeah, the 25 is with 2 people, yeah, so, yeah.
That's flexible.
We recommend twice a week to optimize the strength gains, improves muscle fitness, but occasionally someone says, well, just once a week fits my budget, so in that case, it's 120 a month versus 200 a month, $30 a session. But yeah, good question. Good
So
question.
the other thing is, what about with all those different programs out there? Is it covered in your system, like Silver Slippers? and
Oh,
on?
yes, good question, yeah, no, unfortunately, they're not, we've evaluated that, right, unfortunately, that isn't part of our compensation system, yeah, so it's out of pocket for you. No,
See you.
yeah.
So I was just curious.
Yeah, no,
It's different.
Some do, right.
In a nice way, I mean.
You lose.
Sir.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm 78, and we did, because I'm used to doing 5/8, 4 by 4 drywall. Well,
Yes,
now I'm struggling with a 1/2 inch 4 by 8.
Right,
Now,
no.
you know,
you're right.
so, and you do notice the
You
difference.
feel it. No, you're right, and that happens as we age, correct. I mean, the good news is that can be prevented. It can be actually stalled in its tracks so that you can continue to, what's your name, sir?
Sherman.
So Sherman, so for you, you said
Make it work.
78. So at 78, Sherman, think about it. If you, right now, you're a pretty darn independent guy, you do what you want, you enjoy life. How about if you continue that for another 20 years instead of slowing down, instead of seeing your world shrink because you can't
Well,
move?
it is.
It's too weak, yeah.
But the same thing with it, is you get to a point in life where, your funds, your wants exceed your funds coming in.
Yes,
You know,
yes, yes,
and I-
yes.
yeah, and that's the problem, that's why
Yeah.
I'm asking about
Yeah,
the program.
yeah, so for you, what I would suggest is food for thought. If you wanted a productive, full body workout that will make you stronger, once a week, $30, 120 a month, it'll do it. It'll keep you safe, it'll be 30 minutes once a week, and your life will be better because of it, so yeah. So that, just think about it, so yeah, just so you know.
No, I,
Yep,
you know, and it's a good
Yep.
thing, I do appreciate,
Yep.
you know, trying to figure this out.
Yeah, you're welcome, you're welcome. Are you in the running group, Sean? Okay, phenomenal.
We ran tonight.
Oh, did you? Okay, wow.
But I was there to speak for them to slow down.
But Sherman was way ahead of us
Was he?
tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
I've seen his scores, right, they're fast,
He's in
yeah.
high scores.
Yes, all right, guys, have a good
Bye,
night.
thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Can you,
See you soon.
can you sign
Cole,
him up?
for vacuuming, yes, he's
No,
getting right on it.
Strength training.
Strength training, oh.
He needs it.
Look at him, he's a specimen.